right now.
Hi, Stacia. I just want to let you know that I'm unmuted now, so we're good to go. If you could please unmute also John Ordway. He's the MPS contractor that will be helping me.
Perfect.
I'm good.
Oh, got him.
You
Okay.
good? Okay.
Do either
And
of you
John
share
does
your
have-
screens?
John does have some images that we can share, so if you can allow him to share his screen, that would be helpful.
Excellent.
Dawn, I'm not sure which one you wanted to share first.
Yeah, well, Stacia, let me know when you're ready to get started. The first one, John, would be, I just think an overview of the CERCLA process would be helpful.
I think we're pretty good to go, and folks will steadily probably roll in, but I think in the spirit of timekeeping, we might as well just go ahead and get started.
Okay. So thank you, Stacia. I am Donna Davies, the National Park Service Project Manager for the Kenilworth Park Landfill site. Stacia, do you want to introduce anybody else that's online? I know DOEE is participating and they may assist in some of the answers, and also DPR, Nick Kushner. But
yeah, sure. If any of, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So as I indicated in the email, but for folks who didn't get a chance to see that, we also have some representation from DPR as well as DOEE. If any of you guys want to just quickly introduce yourselves so people can know who's on the line representing your agencies, that'd be great.
Yeah, hey, I can go.
Catherine,
Nick Kushner with DPR. Sorry, Catherine.
No worries. Hey, Nick. I'm Catherine Antos. I'm a senior advisor to the director here at Department of Energy and Environment, and I'll kick it over to Ray Montero.
Hey, good morning, folks. Raymond Montero, Remedial Project Manager for the Kenilworth site at DOEE.
Excellent. Thank you guys for being on. And just to...
And I'm Gretchen McKeska. I'm the Anacostia Coordinator for DOEE.
We also have Natalie Bobman on.
I think
Yeah,
Natalie's on the line
sorry
as
guys.
well.
I'm Natalie Bachman. I'm an attorney with DOEE.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Just so to make it clear for everyone to be on the same page, MPS is sort of who's responsible for the CERCLA process or the cleanup, figuring out what the cleanup alternative is going to be chosen for remediating the landfill site at Kenilworth Park. But what's great is that we have representation from DPR and DOEE who are also in the mix in terms of sharing responsibility for future planning of the site and coordinating implementing whatever the selected cleanup alternative is. So what's nice is that, you know, we have a suite of folks who should be able to respond between the three agencies or multiple agencies to the questions that we field today. So thank you all for showing up at our meeting. We really appreciate it.
Okay, I'd also like to introduce John Ordway from VHB. So he is an MPS contractor that will be helping with the meeting and is supporting the work at Kenilworth.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, before we get into the answers and the questions, I just wanted to do a quick overview of the CERCLA process because it can get very confusing. So this slide shows a poster that we actually posted on the Kenilworth Park Landfill webpage describing the CERCLA process. So we are in the proposed plan and a record of decision step, which is right there. John is circling. So this is the step where we evaluate, we've evaluated the different alternatives to clean up the site, and the proposed plan, we have selected what we feel is the best method to clean up the site. And we put that proposed plan out to the public for public comment. So that's the step we are in now. And this is all part of the community engagement, participating in this meeting and trying to do our best to get as much input from the community as possible on our proposed plan. So the next step after we review everybody's comments, we will select a final remedy for the site, which will be described in the record of decision for the site. And that step, we're hoping the record of decision gets issued in 2021. It does need to go through a significant review process. So that is just an estimation, but it's certainly a goal that we would like to issue the record of decision in 2021. After the record of decision is issued, then we move down to the lower level here that's shown on this slide. We move into the remedial design phase, which is, that's the phase where all the details of the engineering drawings and the plans are prepared. So that's where all of the final decisions for what the land use will be, for example, Kenilworth Park North, those will all be incorporated into the remedial design. After the remedial design is finalized with all of the associated plans, and there's a lot of them that will be prepared as part of this step, the remedial action, which is actually the construction step. So that's the step when the work at the site is actually done. And they often refer to it as implementing the remedy. That's what you'll often hear in CERCLA speak. So that is the actual remedial action. And then the other two steps are the construction completion. So construction completion is met when the objectives of the remedial action have been met. And then the long-term monitoring would include such things as making sure the clean soil cover, wherever it's placed, if that's the alternative that we choose, that it remains protective of human health and operating as intended. So I just wanted to do a quick overview because we'll refer to some of these things as I respond to some of the questions. So thank you, John.
I just wanted to ask really quickly also, Donna, could you just do a really quick and dirty of what CERCLA is and why CERCLA was even queued as a regulatory action, just for folks who may not know?
Okay, so CERCLA it was passed as a law by Congress in 1980. It was the result of sites such as Love Canal, if anybody's familiar with that site. There was a lot of issues with hazardous substances not being managed appropriately in the country. And what that resulted in were hazardous substances migrating from sites and impacting receptors such as surface water, groundwater, and ultimately receptors such as ecological receptors or human health. So Congress passed this law to give a mechanism so these, they call it uncontained hazardous substances at sites could be addressed. The regulations that were implemented as part of CERCLA or due to CERCLA are contained in what's called the National Contingency Plan, or the NCP. So that the NCP provides the framework. So these steps that are shown on this slide, those are all described in the NCP. So that's the process that we must follow as the federal lead agency to investigate a site under CERCLA. Is that helpful?
Yes. And I just wanted to underscore, just because I've seen some community questions on social media and stuff, the CERCLA process is a process to figure out a plan to clean up the landfill that was already at Kenilworth Park. We are not at all talking about putting a landfill there. This is merely talking about a cleanup process for the landfill that has already been covered over at the site. This is further regulation to make sure that this park space is clean for both the environment as well as people. And we're having a discussion about what that cleanup process, what the selected method for cleaning up that landfill site will be.
Thanks, Stacia. And also, I should add that the objective of CERCLA is pretty specific, and that is to address unacceptable risks to human health or the environment. So that's the objective, and that is what we are authorized to do under CERCLA and the NCP. So that goes to some of the answers to the questions about restoring wetlands. That can be completed as part of a different aspect of CERCLA. under the natural resources damage assessment, but it's not part of the response action, which is what we're doing. Those steps shown on this slide are part of a CERCLA response action, specifically a remedial action. So it gets a little confusing, but it's important to understand what we can and cannot do under CERCLA. So does that work, Stacia? Do you want to get into responding to the questions? Uh-oh, I think you're muted.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Hey,
We're ready.
Stacia.
Yep.
This is Ray. I saw something come in on the chat just for CERCLA because that's one of like 5 million acronyms that are used. And it stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Act, Compensation Liability Act. So someone had asked what the acronym means. So
Thank you for responding to that.
yeah.
It's, for some people may have heard of Superfund, and CERCLA is what is part of, Superfund is part of CERCLA. So more often people hear of Superfund than they do of CERCLA.
Excellent.
Right. But we just want to clarify too, that Kenilworth is not a Superfund site.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification. And just for all the audience to note, I'm not ignoring your questions. We're just going to give Donna a chance to respond to all the written questions, and then we'll get into questions in the chat and verbal Q&As to be able to like organize the process.
Stacia, would it be too difficult for you to ask the questions of me, or because I can pull up, I don't have the questions pulled up, but I can do that. Okay, that's there. John, did you do that? That's cool.
I did that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Stacia, do you prefer, do you want me to read the questions and answer, or do you want to, however you want to do it, it's fine.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's great.
So number one, what methane gas tests have been conducted on Kenilworth Park North to assess the current status of landfill off-gassing on site? Are additional tests scheduled from now into the implementation phase of the cleanup? So in 2009, we completed a landfill gas survey that included sampling for methane at 27 locations across the landfill and also around the perimeter, specifically to check for the potential gas migration offsite, which is an important consideration. The study concluded that there was no risk of methane migration into offsite areas. However, there were a few areas within the footprint of the landfill where the concentrations of methane were high enough that they may pose a risk to workers involved in excavating activities. So because of this, part of the institutional controls that we included as part of Alternative 3 includes the requirement that methane gas monitoring must be included prior and during any excavation activities to ensure that that risk is identified and mitigated if there is any. If anyone's interested in the entire 2009 methane gas study, it is included as an appendix to the 2012 feasibility study. So this feasibility study is the one that was completed prior to the more recent one, which we call the feasibility study addendum. So this one is the 2012. It is also available on the webpage. So as part of the implementation of the remedy, definitely included perimeter sampling for methane to just ensure that the conclusions that we've determined from the existing landfill gas data is still applicable. So just as a precaution, we do include perimeter sampling for methane before, during, and after the cleanup. And again, this would be the details of the program will be included as part of plans that are prepared as part of the remedial design.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Stacia, do you want to pause after each one to see if there's any follow-up questions, or would you prefer to wait till the end?
I think we should wait till the end, just so that you can move through the questions, and then if folks want to put things in the chat that are related to certain questions so that they don't forget, I really encourage people to do that. And we'll make sure that time permitting, we go through all of the questions that are in the chat and give the opportunity to respond to those.
Okay, sounds good. And I just want to say, I'm not trying to be rude by not having my video on, but unfortunately my internet connection is satellite. I don't have any other options where I live. So if I put the video on, it will mess up my connection. So just wanted to say I'm not trying to be rude.
We appreciate your presence here in general.
Thank you. Number 2, what recent testing has been done to assess potential groundwater contamination of PCBs and other landfill pollutants, and at what intervals in the timeline of this project? John, I think this is, could you please pull up figure 2 from the proposed plan? Thank you. So this, I just wanted to show what we did in figure 2 is we wanted to just give hopefully an easy to understand sort of summary of all the investigations that have been completed at Kenilworth Park. So this gives a timeline and just a very brief summary of what was actually done as part of that investigation. So if you're interested, for example, in getting more information on the groundwater samples that were collected, you can go to each of these specific reports to get additional details on it. And I would suggest the best document to look at first is the Remedial Investigation Addendum Report, which was done in 2019. So what we did in that report is try to capture a summary of everything that has been done to date. So that would be the best report to look at. But if you want any additional details, most of the information is included as an attachment to the RI Addendum Report, but you can also go back, in some cases, get to the actual primary report that was completed. So I just want to mention that. So to answer the question, in 2013, MPS began a supplemental groundwater study. And I just want to say, so as you can tell from that timeline, we've done a lot of groundwater sampling starting in 1998, which is when the investigation started at this site. So we have about 20 years worth of data. But then I want to discuss specifically the most recent groundwater work that was done, which was started in 2013 as part of the supplemental groundwater study. So in 2014, as part of the study, 20 new monitoring wells were installed. And in 2014, we sampled those 20 new stalls plus the existing 20 stalls. So there's approximately, there's 44 monitoring wells currently on the site. So about 24 existing, 20 new. And in 2017, we collected 2 additional rounds of groundwater samples. And the samples were analyzed for the full list of organic and inorganic parameters, which are shown in the answer that we had to that question, including PCBs. So as I said earlier, we have a large data set of groundwater sampling results. And when we look
And it's ongoing, right?
It's not ongoing right now. It's additional. Well, I'll actually get to that as part of the answer. But the existing data set that we have right now does allow us to make some conclusions regarding the groundwater condition underlying the site. So when you look at the data, it reflects that the condition underlying the site is stable and it's not changing over time. For example, we're not seeing peaks in certain contaminants in certain wells that are changing over time. So that's a good thing. Now, to specifically answer the question regarding PCBs, I think it's important to note that, as you move through time, so we're talking 20-year history of investigations.
Right.
Things, the way you collect samples can change, and the parameter list can change as things become more sophisticated. So originally in 1998, we would sample monitoring wells by using hand reelers, and I did a lot of that. And I mean, that was what you did back at that time. That protocol has changed and become more sophisticated. So the reason I'm saying that is we feel it's probably important to add some additional parameters regarding the PCB testing. So what we have tested for are PCB R cores, which is a list of PCBs, but you can get a even more specific, enlarged list, which are called congeners. So in the future, as part of the remedial design, it's likely that we will collect additional groundwater samples and analyze them for this congener list, which is even more refined specifically for PCBs. So we do plan on doing that for, when I say we, what I say is Park Service will remain the oversight agency who actually does the work that's currently being negotiated. So when I say we, I just want to be clear about that.
It might be
but
MPS, it might be DOEE. That's in
and to be honest,
negotiations.
you know what, there's certain questions that comes up, which it's, well, you know what, I'll just answer that now, and then we can just say that's already been answered. So currently the United States and the district are in negotiations regarding a settlement agreement, but a settlement agreement has not been reached yet. So the settlement agreement will outline the roles and responsibilities of the district and NPS in future activities that will be completed at the site. What we anticipate is that we will remain the federal lead agency. However, the district will likely actually prepare the documents required as part of the remedial design, and they probably will actually implement the remedy. So they will procure the contractor and they will be doing the actual work. But we will continue its oversight. We would continue to review documents that are prepared. So we will continue to work together at this site, but the roles will probably change. So in the past, NPS has been preparing the documents. We feel likely that in the future, DOEE will be preparing the documents.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure. Okay. I think we can move to number 3. So what technical assessments have been made to ensure that soil caps would not impact land settlement at the site in the future? I think this question is related to with the understanding that normally landfills have some settling because as you place waste and cover it, it decomposes and then settles. But at Kenilworth Park landfill, we actually have not seen a lot of settlement. And I believe that's predominantly because the waste was burned and became ash before it was covered. So there has not been a lot of settlement. So because we haven't seen significant settlement, we don't think, excuse me, an additional foot of clean fill placed on top of the existing 2 to 7 feet of soil will cause.
Just to clarify.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, Donna, when you say we haven't seen settlement, that means like you guys have done some sort of like land surveying or something that indicates that you haven't seen any settlement since you guys have been observing things at the site?
John, I don't know if we've done any, we've definitely done land surveying, but I'll let John answer that because he's been involved with the technical portion of the project longer than me.
Yeah, so there haven't been specific surveys, but the thing that happens with these landfills is as the settlement occurs, you end up with big depressions and you have drainage problems. There are a few areas across the site that are minor depressions. There's one area that's wet a lot of the time, but for the most part, the land has remained stable as Donna described, and the conditions haven't changed over the past 10 or 20 years significantly. So there was some organic waste, municipal solid waste placed there at the very end of the life of the landfill. In 1968, they stopped burning, and then they put raw municipal waste in there for a couple of years before they closed. But that stopped in 1970, and the decomposition of that waste is likely completed at this point. It's so long ago, and that's probably why we haven't seen significant settlement. Whereas some landfills that are all municipal waste, you'll see quite a lot more settlement, and it's a bigger design concern.
Got it.
Thank you, John. So moving to number 5, I think, or 4, sorry. And I'm gonna, I might just pick up the pace a little bit, only because I'm mindful of the time. We only have till 11, is that correct, Stacia?
I actually put this till 11:30. I don't know how much time folks have allotted to be able to be
All
on
right.
this, but
Okay, I just want to make sure we have enough time for people to ask follow-up questions. So, how would soil caps impact the potential for ball fields at the site in the future, and what sorts of additional remediation and institutional controls would have to happen for active recreational development? So the purpose of placing the clean soil barrier over the site is to actually allow for that active recreational development, because that serves as the barrier that will protect active recreational users. And when we say active recreational users in quotation, what we're referring to are people that are involved in activities such as playing ball, playing football, or playing soccer on developed recreational fields. And the reason that's different than what we define as a passive recreational user, which would be using the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail or bird watching, is because if you're involved with activities like playing football or soccer, your potential exposure to soil is greater than if you're walking on the established, for example, Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. So that's the difference between the two different types of users. So the purpose of the clean soil barrier is to allow those fields to be developed that would protect people involved with those active recreational users. And it would also allow for turf to be grown, because it's 6 inches of clean fill and 6 inches of topsoil. So I think that's good for 4. Number 5. What is the plan for the proposed stakeholder engagement in the cleanup alternative design phase? So community engagement is really important as part of the CERCLA process, and Congress, as part of the CERCLA law, as part of the NCP, the framework that we must follow, there are specific points in the CERCLA process where we are required to do specific community engagement activities, such as the public meeting that we held after release of the proposed plan. But they're fairly minimal, the requirements, and we obviously want to have a more robust community engagement. So that's why we're trying to do as much outreach as possible. And to be honest, I know MPS, we've learned through this process, the stakeholders that maybe we did not identify as part of our community involvement plan. So we did prepare, and it's required to prepare a community involvement plan as part of the CERCLA process. The existing plan is currently on the Kenilworth Park webpage. We will be revising that plan prior to the remedial design, and we're going to capture all the lessons learned as part of this proposed plan community outreach effort. So it's very important to the Park Service. Also, I think it's very important, DOEE and DPR are starting their community engagement. So we're not going to wait until the remedial design phase begins. That's starting right now, and I'll let Nick speak more to that. But it's very important to get the community input on as this process moves forward. And Nick, if you want to just describe sort of where you're at with DOEE and the future community engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. So as Donna said, we are really excited to start engaging the community more around the future use of the site. While the CERCLA process will define specific design parameters, we have been working closely with MPS, both of our agencies, to ensure that the district still has ultimate flexibility based on our community engagement in what goes into the final designs of the space. And so really our timeline for getting a more solid future land use plan for the entire site would be at the time that these remedial design conversations start happening. So basically, if you can think of the timeline that Donna showed before, that kind of gap between where we are now and then it moved to the level below where we start remedial design, that area, while MPS is working on the record of decision, is when DPR and DOEE are going to start with both some larger public engagement, but initially kind of doing some educational outreach, making sure that people feel comfortable about what's happening, that they understand what's happening in the park space and what the future process looks like, producing some educational materials, we'd love to join any community meetings that are upcoming, and just have open conversations, hear from you on what your concerns are, what your concerns about the past history of the site and the environmental injustice that's taken place on the site are, and really just build some trust in the process as we get into kind of a larger and more kind of official engagement, which we'd hope to launch sometime in the summer to the fall area. So we have time where we want to start being kind of on the ground, hypothetically, to and in person, actually, if we can, if it's safe enough, to start getting educational materials out, hearing from community residents, talking to folks, answering questions, explaining where we are and how we'll get to a future land use map. So essentially, we're looking at, at the latest, we would start kind of, if you're familiar with DPR, kind of like the official public meeting process, where we kind of host like larger public meetings that are advertised. At the latest, that would start in the fall. So we have a window where we're going to be building and meeting, and we're open to any opportunities to come to community meetings and meet and talk. And just wanted to also check with Catherine or anyone else from DOE if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Thanks, Nick. I'll just add to that DPR and DOE are working closely together. And, as Donna mentioned earlier, DOE will likely have a role in the remedial design process. And so we're certainly look to work with DPR in these community meetings and public meetings so that we're there as well. And just like as Nick offered, if there are additional meetings that you're hosting that you would like us to be present at, that offer that Nick made, that also applies to DOE. So just let us know. And we appreciate working with Stacia and the Anacostia Park and Community Collaborative as a way to help us identify those opportunities where we should be showing up and engaging with you. Thanks.
And one last thing I'll just add is that, Nick and Catherine have been really great in working with me and trying to make sure that they're doing their due diligence to figure out how to have the most robust and grounded community engagement around listening and engagement about the future use of the park space. So we're definitely working together on that. And if for whatever reason you don't necessarily feel comfortable reaching out to either of them or any agency leaderships, please always feel free to sort of flag to me community meetings, neighborhood associations, or any places that you think it would be worthwhile to sort of have a presentation or some kind of engagement around what you want to see in Kenilworth happen. Feel free to use me as a middle person to communicate those things. I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to question number 6. I'll just paraphrase this rather than reading the entire question. So this question is related to if the district decides to put wetlands or meadows someplace within Kenilworth Park North, how will that be incorporated into NPS's CERCLA review from a process and timing standpoint? So at this point, John, could you please pull up the figure that DOEE provided to us, which is the conceptual? Thank you. No, that's not it. It's I'm trying to see what it was named. DOEE provided, as part of their comments on the proposed plan, they provided a conceptual preliminary plan for Kenilworth Park North, which included identifying some areas they feel would be appropriate to restore as wetlands and also to maintain as meadows. I'm trying to see, poor John, I just sent him these
Donna,
this morning.
Hey, Donna, this is Ray. I think that's the figure that was included in our comment.
Is it? Oh, there it is. It looks so much
Yeah.
like I see. I'm sorry. That's because I was biased when I was looking at it. So thank you, John.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I've looked at so many of these, they're all starting to look alike. So this one, as you can see, and I just want to stress, and I'll let DOE speak more to this, but this is preliminary in nature. So this is just thought. We're early in the process of actually delineating specific areas, because that will all be done as part of the remedial design. But these are some conceptual thoughts. So you see the tidal wetland restoration area, that would not be capped or covered with a clean fill soil barrier, and also some areas that would be managed as meadows and a resource management area, which would, again, not be developed into active recreational fields. I don't, Ray, do you want to add anything more to this, or Nick, other than it's like, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ray again at DOEE. This is our conceptual thinking of where we want to have some wetland restoration work done. Again, the area in the orange is some meadow area that we would like not capped. Like Donna mentioned, we, in our comment letter on the proposed plan, we were requesting some additional soil and groundwater sampling. So that data could feed into where, slight changes can be made. That we may want to cap some areas, we may not want to cap some areas based on that data. So that'll feed into it. But this is a good general idea, picture of, the wetland restoration, which is, quite a large portion of the area there.
And
Okay.
This is Nick. I just wanted to chime in just so people are aware that DPR and DOE work together on these comments. And so both of the agencies are on board and supportive of this and in the impact that this can have in restoring our natural environment and also promoting a lot of the goals that the district has through its sustainable DC plan, its resilient DC plan, its climate action plan, and also help alleviate flooding concerns for nearby residents in the area. So we're really excited about this and think it will lead to a really holistic, multifaceted park design that can have a lot of different elements for different folks to enjoy.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Nick. That's an important part that I left out. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, Ray. I just want to also add, so when we're referring to sampling that will be done as part of the remedial design, so that is a normal aspect of most circular remediations. They're usually called something like pre-design investigations. So that's not unique to this site. And the purpose of those investigations is to just collect additional data. So once you've selected a remedy, then you need additional data to really define that remedy. So exactly where you're going to put the clean soil barrier, and you will likely need additional soil samples to ensure that you are being protective. So I just wanted to add that so people understand, because I think sometimes the perception is these investigations go on forever, but there is a purpose to an investigation that's completed as part of the remedial design. It's an important part of the process. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay, John, if you wanted to go back to the, thank you, questions.
I think you just answered number 7.
Yeah, okay. And the next one is, okay, yes. So that I think is answered. Number 8 was about planting trees. There are no issues with planting trees. We would just want to ensure that the clean soil barrier is still performing as intended, which is to protect active recreational users. But other than that, there would not be an issue with planting trees. I think maybe it's important to just note, what may be an issue at some sites that are landfills is you would not want water percolating through the waste and impacting groundwater. But at this site, this has not been identified as an issue. So planting trees, we do not feel would be an issue. Number 9, footers and future foundation. Yes, foundations and footers can be installed, but again, any activity that includes digging as part of the institutional control, you would have to develop plans to protect the workers involved with that work. And that would be to ensure that they're not exposed to methane, unexplained ordnance, or contact with any waste. So that those health and safety plans would have to be prepared prior to any digging. But other than that, yes, you could install foundations and footers. And I should also say, I mean, there would be definite plans that would cover this type of activity, and it would be also soil management, stormwater management. What do you do if you have to excavate material? How do you manage that? How do you dispose of that? That would all be covered as part of it. And those plans will be developed as part of the remedial design. Number 10 was about gardens. Excuse me. Gardens can be developed. They would just need to be in raised beds, so they wouldn't be actually on the clean soil barrier. We would put them on raised beds, and they could be outside of the clean soil barrier. I'm sorry, that was I misspoke. But as long as they're in raised beds. Number 11, regarding signage. So will signage or other forms of communication be posted during the implementation of the proposed cleanup to notify the community of potential health risks associated with construction in the landfill area? So when you're implementing a remedy, you would have to comply with all of the normal health and safety protocols that would apply at any construction site, because it is a construction. So the signs, the barriers, all of that, that would all be detailed in a plan, again, that would be prepared as part of the remedial design. And it would be for the purposes of protecting visitors and protecting workers.
I just wanted to follow up quickly on that and say, just like in terms of though, like on the physical space when construction begins, like I'm sure there'll be all the basic construction sort of barriers that you would expect for construction, but I'm wondering, would there be things like additional signage placed around the construction site just to make the community aware of what's happening for folks who may or may not be aware of any of the potential risks to construction workers and what's happening at this site specifically? Because it isn't just a basic construction, you know?
Got it. Yep. So I can only, now we haven't discussed this, I haven't discussed this with Ray at DOEE, but I would say that in the other remediations I've been involved with at the National Park Service, we definitely include signage, we include information on our webpage, we try to get it out to the community as much as possible, what's occurring, including in fixed signs. This is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, just so the community is aware. So I agree it's important, but we haven't actually discussed that with DOE. But I would anticipate that, yes, because it's an area that's actively used and it is important to the community, I would anticipate that we would do that, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Donna, this is Ray. We agree. We're on the same page.
Thank you. Number 12, how will the CERCLA team ensure the best management practices are incorporated in the design and implementation of the cleanup as it relates to abating polluted soil erosion and green stormwater management pollution into the Anacostia? So I think it's important to note, to answer this question, that we're required to achieve, to follow all applicable laws and regulations during the cleanup. So CERCLA, you don't have to apply for permits, but you have for any, you know, if a permit would be required, for example, for stormwater erosion, but you must meet all of the requirements of the permit if a permit was required. It gets a little bit confusing, but the bottom line is, as part of the CERCLA process, as part of the feasibility study, we identified what's called applicable or relevant and appropriate requirements, which are ARARs. They're included as table 3. So those are all the things that we feel must be met as part of the implementation of the remedy. And that would include stormwater management, best management practices. Stormwater management is usually a specific plan. I mean, I don't know if it will be in this particular case, but normally for these projects, it has its own plan. It's that important.
Got it. That's helpful.
Number 13, can you detail the timeline of the process from ROD, design and cleanup, implementation, and land transfer? Yes. So as I said earlier, MPS expects the ROD to be issued in 2021. That's certainly our goal. But as I said, has to go through an extensive review and approval process within the Park Service and also DOI. And when it leaves the Park Service, I mean, we have limited ability to sort of impact that process and how quickly it goes. We're, you know, best guess is 2021, and that's what we would anticipate, that we could issue a ROD by 2021. The transfer of Kenilworth Park North will likely occur after issuance of the ROD. So again, this has not been actually agreed upon, but that's what we anticipate will occur. We can't really estimate the actual timing of the start of the remedial design because it depends not only on when the ROD is issued, but it also depends on the finalization of the settlement agreement between the district and the United States. So the remedial design won't start until that settlement agreement has been executed, and that settlement agreement will outline our future relationship and roles. So unfortunately, as far as putting a date on when the remedial design will start, I really can't do that because it's
Some things are up in the air still, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I know that Park Service and DOE at the district, where everyone, you know, wants the project to keep moving forward. So I can say that. 14, what improvements to the site in terms of facilities, bathrooms, pavilions, paved areas are possible for each proposed remediation method? I can just simplify this. So for alternatives, we looked at the first two alternatives were not really viable that we evaluated, so I won't even discuss those. Alternative 3 is our preferred alternative. Alternative 4 was similar, except that it also included removal of vegetation at Kenilworth Park South and placement of the clean soil barrier. And then alternative 5 was complete removal of the landfill and restoration to pre-landfill conditions, which would be basically wetlands. So for under alternative 3 and 4, there would be, those improvements would be possible with no issues because we're doing the clean soil barrier. So as we described in some of the other answers, you know, we can do that. Any work like that, any improvement would just have to be done in accordance with established plans to protect workers and the visitors and the environment. But for alternative 5, because you're restoring the entire area back to wetland conditions, that would limit the ability to do active recreational development or these other facilities. But I think some of the answers to our other questions sort of help understand where you can do some wetland development, restoration, I should say, allow some areas to be meadows and also develop some areas. So I think some of the other answers probably already addressed that question.
Okay, so Donna, I just want to say, I think we should stop if by 11:05 we're still moving through these questions. We should stop and address some of the questions in the chat. Okay. I know there's at least 2 Kenilworth residents who put questions in the chat, and I don't want those to get missed. So just wanted to, timekeeping wise, throw that out there for you.
Okay, I think I can move through the rest fairly quickly.
Okay.
So 15, if Kenilworth Park South remains undisturbed, will it be possible to remove invasive plants? Yes. Again, when I said, health and safety plans have to be prepared, have to be followed, but the answer is yes. 16, to comply with the Organic Act, MPS does not accept institutional controls that would impair the intended use of the park. For example, MPS would not allow permanent fencing or restrictive signage as an alternative to removal, containment, or treatment of contamination. How will access to Kenilworth Park South be handled given there remains some hazard? So the important part of this question is, yeah, it does not accept institutional controls that would impair the intended use of the park. But for Kenilworth Park South, the intended use of the park is not being impaired because we have identified no unacceptable risk or hazard to visitors involved in the passive recreational activities, which will be the activities that will be allowed within Kenilworth Park South. So Kenilworth Park South is managed by the National Park Service. It's different than Kenilworth Park North. and the management is outlined in the Anacostia Park General Management Plan. So that area is, go ahead.
I'm just going to ask if you could just quickly show on the map the differentiation between Kenilworth Park South, so people could have some
Yep.
land markers in case they don't know formally the difference between the two.
Okay, yep, I'll let John, give John some time. There you go. So there's the north, Kenilworth Park North shown on this figure. That will be transferred, the jurisdiction will be transferred to the district. Kenilworth Park South will remain managed by Park Service. And when we looked at the different alternatives, we had to look at what is the anticipated future use. Well, that was already defined for Kenilworth Park South in the Anacostia Park General Management Plan. There's no intention of developing that area for active recreational uses other than the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. But other than that, there are no plans to do any additional development. So that area is going to stay natural. So there is no unacceptable risk. So the question, as far as institutional controls, that's the answer. That there is, we are not inhibiting the future use of Kenilworth Park South.
Perfect, thank you.
So number 17 the question was about describing the natural resources damage assessment process. So who will be involved and how is it related to CERCLA in terms of content, timing, and administration. For those that don't know, NRDA stands for Natural Resource Damage Assessment. So it's a process that is the responsibility of what are called the natural resource trustees. So, for example, the Anacostia River, the trustees are the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the district. So the trustee council is currently engaged for the Anacostia River site, and they're discussing whether to address the river and riverside sites, which includes Kenilworth, as a whole or on a site-by-site basis. So the trustees will be responsible for conducting a natural resource damage assessment if they feel that is appropriate specifically for Kenilworth. And the purpose of that assessment is to identify and measure injury to, destruction of, or loss of natural resources caused by the releases of hazardous substances. And the trustees can bring a claim against the site's potentially responsible parties for natural resources damages or any damages recovered to restore or natural resources. So in practice, normally the NRDA process follows the implementation of a remedy because it has to do with residual damages.
Like the impact, so right? The impact.
Yeah, so damages that remain. So the NRDA process has not started yet at Kenilworth. So that's probably the easiest, quickest answer. 18, what involvement will NPS have with decisions regarding Kenilworth Park once administration is transferred to the district? So administration is only being transferred for Kenilworth Park North. So we will continue as the manager of Kenilworth Park South. But again, as I said earlier, the future relationship between the district and the Park Service is currently under negotiations. So, but the Kenilworth Park North will be managed by the district after implementation of the remedy. So that's probably a shorter, quicker answer. And kind of ties into the next one, to what agency specifically will administration Kenilworth Park North be given? I will let the district answer that. I probably Nick. I mean, I just wrote there what our understanding is, which is it's DPR, but I don't know that that's been determined yet, Nick.
Yeah, I think that's part of the ongoing conversations, but that's kind of been our take on it as well throughout the conversations. DPR would be the main managing entity. Obviously, DOEE would have a stake with the potential for wetland restoration and natural habitat there. And then, as in all district lands, it technically sits under the Department of General Services in their facilities inventory, as they would be the entity in charge of managing and maintaining the space once transferred.
Thank you, Nick. I'll just paraphrase this question. It has to do with restoring Watts Branch. I think everybody understands that Watts Branch, it would be great if it could be restored. It's a fairly impacted stream. This cannot be accomplished as part of the circular response to Kenilworth Park landfill, but we certainly would support any activities the district wants to undertake to improve that stream. And they have, you know, the district has a really highly successful stream restoration program, and they've already restored upstream stretches of Watts Branch. And I guess that to leave the answer at that, we would certainly fully support any work DOE plans to do for Watts Branch in the future. 21, is there possibility for transfer of land? It's, the maintenance yard. Currently, there is no plans to transfer that portion of land to the district. 22.
If we can just take this last question, and then I want to leave time and space for addressing the Kenilworth residents' questions in the chat and all the chat questions. And now that folks have your contact information, you know, if there's further elaboration you need from the written responses, or if you need a copy of the written response, feel free to email me and/or Donna. I will put both of our emails in the chat, but want to make space for Kenilworth neighborhood residents, or all the neighborhoods surrounding it, to be able to ask questions.
You know what, Stacia, if you don't mind, the only one, I'd just like to quickly answer 24. Let's skip to 24 because that one we haven't touched on at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to do with who would have jurisdiction, police jurisdiction, once Kenilworth Park North is transferred, and also just set hours. So the district will set the hours, and after transfer, the Metropolitan Police Department as a district's police force would have primary jurisdiction, but the U.S. Park Police will still have concurrent jurisdiction. So a practical matter, if someone calls 911, if the Park Police is in the area, they will respond first and they can arrest if they happen to be in the area. But primary responsibility would transfer to the district at that point. Okay, I just wanted to touch on that one.
Thank you. So I know that at least Justin and Kenya, who have put some questions in the chat, live in neighborhoods surrounding the park. So I'm going to ask their questions out of the chat first, and then move through the rest of the questions in the chat, and then open it up for folks to verbally ask questions, if that makes sense. So we can try and get as many questions answered as possible. So the first question from Justin is, I have a question. How will long-term monitoring products be reported to the community? Can we build a process where we annually inform residents of the status of the site? This could be done by liaising with ANC 7D or community organizations. Many residents don't understand the nature and risks of contamination at Kenilworth, and information would go a long way to addressing concerns.
Okay, I think that's a great comment. What I would say is I really appreciate that comment, and it would be something that the Park Service along with the district should consider. And I really appreciate that because it's something that maybe we wouldn't be thinking about. So that would be, like I said, something to determine as part of the remedial design and as we move through the remedy and develop long-term monitoring plans. So what I could say at this point is thank you very much for the comment. And I think that is something important, and I think it's a great idea, and I will leave it at that. And Ray, I don't know if you want to just chime in.
Yeah, I think if I caught the beginning of that question correctly, it was how the long-term monitoring results will be communicated. Was that correct, Stacia?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I would imagine that you know, once the monitoring is completed and documented, those documents will be public, you know, results of that. Is that not correct, Donna?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, I think that would be a great idea, and it's something we could certainly do.
Yeah, we just have to figure out how we communicate that. Yeah.
And I don't want to speak for Justin, but I'll just say that, like, I think also what folks are asking for, and if Justin is still on, please feel free to jump in and speak for yourself, but like, also making sure that outside of putting formal documentation on like the agency websites, figuring out ways to regularly make sure that there's additional ways to communicate to community members in plain language, sort of basic information, I think is what Justin is getting at, just so that like we're doing more than just checking the box, but actually like building trust by making sure that citizens have a sense of safety around what is happening because they feel like they're being communicated regularly about the status of the site.
And no,
They
just
just,
putting it on.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Donna. Just putting it on the website is not sufficient. We have to have a proper communication to let everybody know. I agree.
Yeah, and Stacia, I could not agree with you more. I'm all about plain language, and I think that's an area that we can definitely improve on, and we are committed to doing that, trust me. I definitely agree. And I think like working with you is you've been really helpful to just trying to reach the people that we need to reach. So,
excellent. And I will continue to partner with you guys in that way as well. And let me just put out there, if there's any especially residents who live in the neighborhoods, Eastland Gardens, Kenilworth, any of those neighborhoods surrounding the park in particular, if you all community leaders hear questions and concerns from residents about wanting to know certain information about what's happening, APACC is here on behalf of community to sort of, you know, be the entity to get those questions answered and to communicate them in as plain a language as possible. So we will continue to try our best to do that like we're doing right now. And then I want to make sure we get these two questions from Kenya. One is, how long will the cleanup project take, and will residents who are qualified help, or can they be employed for the project? I think she's referring to both in the construction of remediation and or the future development of the park, or feel free to speak for yourself, Kenya.
Yeah, I think I do understand her question. So again, with the understanding that we are assuming that the district would be responsible for implementing the remedy, which means they would be responsible for contracting with contractors. I don't know about their specific requirements using local sources, but Ray can speak more to that if he's aware, but I would just say that as far as the timeline, what we anticipate for just the construction phase, so this doesn't include developing the plans, the remedial design. So just once all the plans are completed, once the contractor has been procured, which that can be an extensive process, it takes a long time. But once that's all in place and we're ready to hit the ground, we anticipate 1 to 2 years to actually implement the remedy. And again, this would also be dependent on what Kenilworth Park North, what the final configuration actually is. But what we use as a time frame is 1 to 2 years. I would say closer to 2 because with construction, everything takes longer than what you anticipate, but that's sort of the time frame we're thinking. And Ray, I don't know if you want to add anything about contracting local sources.
Yeah, I would have to check with our contracting and procurement folks. I assume we do have some requirements. There's also, I'll also have to check with the natural resource folks upstairs about possible opportunities for community members to help with the wetlands restoration work. I honestly don't know. I don't want to say anything and put it in stone, but you know, possibly there are opportunities there. So I'll follow up, Stacia.
I will at least just say on behalf of APACC, I will continue to ask questions about opportunities for direct recruitment in both the construction and implementation of whatever the cleanup process, as well as the future development of the park site. I'll continue to be that person asking questions about how we can create pipelines to intentionally employ folks from the surrounding neighborhoods in that process and communicate back to everyone like where there's opportunities to do that.
And
Stacia, this is Catherine.
Go ahead,
I'll add to that as I've talked about with you one-on-one, but for the group to know, DOEE is considering what types of training programs that we would need to get in place so that residents could be skilled to support such remediation activities. So that is also something that we are pursuing.
And Nick, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to throw in too that it's something that DPR is very open to having further conversations around too, as we develop what the future land use looks like from the recreational side, and what the jobs will be that will be created through that, in working to provide permanent employment to local residents and find a way to continue those conversations and pipelines.
Excellent. And then one last question. I know
Stacey.
that, yep.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly add that regarding the training, you know, OSHA does require certain minimal training if you're involved with some of the active soil movement at a CERCLA site. So I just wanted to add that it's not anything that anyone can get it. It's just there are some specific training requirements that OSHA does require if you're going to be involved with like soil disturbing activities at a CERCLA site.
Thank you. There's also a question that was fielded to me directly that asks, what's the plan for community outreach that will be implemented if the community is not getting the regular information? Will you, and I think that means the agency partners involved, hire community members to get the word out? So is there thoughts about actually providing some monetary support for residents to help to make sure that their neighbors are actually getting information about what's happening in this process, I think is the question.
So I can jump in just to say that it's definitely a model that we've seen some agencies across the district use before, typically going through a third-party community-based organization. We currently don't have any funds for outreach available for this project this fiscal year. So that's not something that we could agree to this fiscal year, but if funds become available, that's definitely something that we could pursue approaching that model for future outreach.
Well, APACC is definitely willing to work with agency partners to make sure that that happens. Just in full disclosure for everyone on the call, it is a challenge in terms of figuring out way to distribute funds to community members as like a nonprofit entity. And that's something that I've been steadily, feverishly working to figure out what is the best model in terms of not having like liability issues, and I'm working on that specific issue. And if there's any other nonprofit orgs that have done community stipend type situations that have a model, please reach out to me. But we do have resources, and APACC is working on ways to partner with agencies to make sure that we can actually support getting community members paid to actually be the ambassadors to spreading information about what happens at Kenilworth Park.
Thank you, Stacia. And I would anticipate that we would work with you in that regard, and that would probably be the most effective and most efficient means to do that.
And now I'm going to go through the questions in the chat. Unless I want to give one last opportunity before I start going into the chat questions. Are there any people who live in the neighborhoods surrounding Kenilworth Park who have a question that they'd like to verbally ask right now before I start getting into the chat questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. Go to the top of the questions here. Okay. So, question was asked, what financial liability does MPS have related to the cleanup once implementation begins?
That is all going to be part of the settlement agreement. So that is currently being negotiated. So nothing has been determined yet.
Excellent. And is there leaching to the river and or Watts Branch? I'm assuming it's asking about leaching from potential pollutants from the landfill.
Right. So that kind of ties into all of the groundwater investigations that I was talking is one of the first questions that I answered. So current data indicates that we do not currently have leaching into the river from groundwater or to Watts Branch. So groundwater discharge to surface water does not seem to be an issue. As part of the pre-design investigation, we anticipate anyway doing additional sampling for the list of PCB conjugars just to ensure that what we feel is happening is actually, or I should say not happening, that we are
confident
sort of,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that we just ensure that that is still the situation. That's the groundwater is not currently a source of contaminants to the adjacent surface waters.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and hey, Stacia, can I just mention one more thing? So Donna hit the nail on the head there with the additional sampling of wells, perimeter wells for PCB congeners. We also did, and Donna, I think it's listed in the RI addendum report, the SEEP investigation.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
what we did is, the first part of that is we did an aerial survey where a plane basically goes over the land and takes pictures. Based on temperature, you can see where groundwater is moving. Right. So we identified areas where there are seeps from the landfill, and then we went out on the site and kind of ground truthed them to see what was there. And then when we actually found seeps, we sampled them. So, there was no contamination, for PCBs or anything in that. And I'm pretty sure, Donna, that's included in the RI addendum report as an appendix, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Just to add, it's another line of evidence that helps.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray.
Yep.
And then there's a question asked, can Kelvin Mock be officially recognized at the site? And I think this question is probably Nick can respond to how these sorts of things would probably be a part of the, us doing community visioning and how that would inform the design of future use of the park. But
yeah, definitely. I think that was Dennis who suggested that. I think it's a great idea to recognize him, and also all of those conversations, yes, totally relevant to the future land use, and creating some kind of memorial does have to go through a separate process in DC. And there's a bunch of work that's been done recently in updating the regulations around that with the mayor's naming. DC Faces Task Force last summer, where she went through all the names of public entities. But we're definitely really interested in pursuing that and honoring the history and the legacy in Kenilworth. So great idea.
I see there's a question. Why does ARWT get an exception in Kenilworth Park South? This will be very damaging to the site, is a question.
What is ARWT?
I think
Anacostia Riverwalk.
Anacostia River. Oh, why did they get an exception? You mean for development? Because it will be because the extension will be developed across Kenilworth Park South. I think that's what you're referring to. Well, the point that was part of the general management plan, so that wasn't something decided as part of the circle process. So Park Service worked with DDOT. That's been in the planning stages for a long period of time. So we just took the information that existed, which is the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail extension will be developed across Kenilworth Park South. So I think the only thing I could say is, because I was not involved with DDOT's planning of that, I would have to do some digging to determine how it was determined where that extension would be placed. And John, I don't know, you were involved before I started. I don't know if you have anything to add. I don't know that you would, but in case you do, I'll give you the opportunity.
Well, yeah,
I will just say, sorry, John, we are involved with DDOT, and we, when they have plans, we are provide our input on those plans and how the activities can be done so that it's done safely and doesn't impact the environment. But go ahead, John.
So there was a planning process for the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail that concluded, I think, quite a while ago, maybe 2012 timeframe or something like that. But that's when the plans for the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail were adopted, and this alignment was identified in that earlier planning effort, and then it was incorporated into the the comprehensive management plan for the park. So it's when we looked at remedies, we looked at what the future land use was going to be. And at Kenilworth Park South, it included natural resource recreation, and the recreation piece of that was the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. So that's just how the land use was established in that plan, and we adopted that for designing or considering different alternatives.
Thank you, John.
Then I see Trey asked here, are you barred under CERCLA for going further, or is it simply an obligation? And I'm wondering if he's referring to, or Trey, I don't know if he's still on, if he wants to jump in, but.
Yeah, I can hop on real quick. That was from early on when Donna was talking about the limits of NPS's ability to do further work under CERCLA. And I wanted to clarify whether or not NPS is barred from doing any kind of restoration work under CERCLA, or if they are simply not required to do so.
It gets a little complicated because when you say under CERCLA, I just want to be clear that we're talking about the response action. So the NRDA process, the Natural Resources Damage Assessment process, that is actually part of CERCLA, but that is a different part of CERCLA. So as part of this response action, the answer is yes. We do not have the authority to do things within the CERCLA process that do not address unacceptable risk that we've identified to human health or the environment. So the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
And then I think I went over all the questions that weren't either answered in the chat, but if I missed anything, I just want to open the floor now fully for people to ask any additional questions that they have now to any of the parties who are present.
Yeah, I'd like to have further question or another opportunity to discuss the impact of the trail on Kenilworth Park South. The environmental assessment for that project definitely involved coordinating with all these other projects, not supplanting all the other projects. So I'd like to have another discussion on that.
So Marion, I see in the chat you say, please, I think you meant please do not dig as part of constructing the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail.
Well, what I meant was you said that you wanted to dig into it further.
Oh,
That was
okay.
the kind of
Yeah,
digging.
actually, I think, yeah, to be honest with you, I think John's answer was perfect. So as far as the environmental assessment, so that was done before we had all of the results of additional surface soil sampling that was conducted at Kenilworth Park South. So we still weren't sure if there were hazards there in the surface soil or not, and what those hazards, what they may pose to the users of the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. But now we have that information. So that means that we can do we have a better understanding, and that construction and use of the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail does not cause unacceptable risk to visitors. So, and John, I believe the plan is that the trail will be constructed 2 feet above the current elevation. And the reason that is the case is because they didn't want to hold up the construction of that trail for the CERCLA work or the CERCLA remediation. And at that time, we didn't know if there was any risk. So that was why that plan was put in place to construct that trail 2 feet above the existing surface soil. But I believe that is still the plan. John, do you have any insight on that?
I don't think that the details of the trail at Kenilworth Park South have been sorted out yet. It's been sort of a future extension. But you're right, the trail does cross Kenilworth Park North. It's there now. It is about 2 feet above the ground surface, and that was because at the time NPS was considering a 2-foot cap rather than a 1-foot cap, and so they raised that bed up 2 feet so that when eventually, if it was covered with 2 feet, the trail wouldn't be buried. or would be at a grade that would fit in. So I don't know that they need to do that now. If they were going to put that in before the 1 foot cap got put on in Kenilworth Park North, then they would, raise it up at least that 1 foot, making sure that, you have drainage and other issues are dealt with from design. But there's no reason that can't be installed on top of the landfill as it already was at Kenilworth Park North. But Kenilworth Park South, I don't think the plans are developed yet.
Yes, I'll just add to that. I do know, because I am kept in the loop, DDOT is in the planning process, but I have not seen any actual designs yet, but they are in the planning process. But John, correct me if I'm wrong, they do not have to do 1 foot or 2 foot above Kenilworth Park South because risk, to address any issues regarding CERCLA. They may do that to make the trail, so for erosion and things like that, but we don't have any specific requirements of how the trail must be constructed to avoid any future unacceptable risk to visitors of the trail. Is that accurate, John?
Yeah,
this is Trey. Speaking as a cyclist, I would love to see it flush with the adjacent area, whatever that is, because that trail is packed. And so a raised trail that eliminates any opportunity to have a shoulder would be a pretty significant safety hazard on the Riverwalk Trail. So if y'all can do whatever on your end to help push that, so that whatever the final trail height is, it's flush with the land adjacent to it, that would be very useful from a recreation safety point of view. From a bird's eye view, looking at the map, the plan is to keep that trail where it is, where the road is currently. Is that correct?
No, it's not. That's not where it's shown. The point I'm trying to make is that putting that trail in there, making another bridge across Watts Branch, is going to introduce a third bridge within the park, and it's going to destroy the natural area. There's already a bridge. There's already a paved surface. There's no reason to put that trail on the river's edge. It's destructive and it's contrary to the management plan.
So it seems like that Riverwalk Trail development is still in some kind of planning phase, if I'm hearing correctly. So it seems like there's potential opportunity for there to be publicly informed comments about what happens with that. I don't know who.
Stacia, I actually don't know if that's true, because that's a DDOT managed project.
Okay.
So I don't know where, as far as public input, I don't know.
Is that DDOT strictly, or is that, we got the impression from the 30% design meeting that NPS was a major design partner in that process. Obviously not the CERCLA folks, but my impression at this point was that NPS and DDOT were kind of co-leads on the design because it was on NPS property. And it would be good to make sure that they are coordinated, because of all this work being planned now for Kenilworth Park North, it would be really unfortunate to see something go in under the DDOT plan, which has not been vetted through this same portion of actual, pretty strong community input, which seems to be the plan going forward for Kenilworth Park North with DPR, DOEE, and NPS. So for the record, I've been really impressed with the responses on this call by the agencies, and I am greatly heartened in how Kenilworth Park North is looking, having seen some of those maps that were laid out. It would be really sad after that result today to see our opportunities get limited artificially by the trail, especially because they seem to be in a rush to complete that before this work would go in. I would love to see that work for a trail in Kenilworth Park North not be allowed to continue until we know what this process is going to turn out there.
Well, I'd love, just in the spirit of timekeeping, not to cut you off, Trey, but if Donna and Nick, as it relates to Kenilworth Park developments in general, if you guys have any contact with other entities with the land management on the NPS side that we might connect to related to the Riverwalk Trail and DDOT's planning on that would be really helpful if you could identify any people that we could reach out to about that.
Yeah, I'll start with my contact within the Park Service. Mike Camiso is the person who gets me the plans when he needs me to review and provide comments. So let me start with him and work from there. He's the person plugged in with DDOT, so I can do that, yes.
Yeah, and Stacia, I can also follow up with some of the trail planners I know at DDOT, just to see who's the best person to talk to about that and see if they can answer some of these questions and provide greater clarity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, we're a little bit past 11:30 and I want to value everybody's time. I just want to give a really, really big thank you to Donna and all of the sort of agency representatives and contractors who made themselves available to really dig deeper into answering these questions. I will at least say from my perspective, and I've been involved in a fair number of multi-agency planning processes and remediation projects. You guys have really been great partners in figuring out ways to make yourself available to as robust a community engagement process as possible. So I really want to give you guys a big hand and thank you again on behalf of APACC for showing up and you know, being willing to sort of directly respond to people's questions. I think that is the first step in a pathway towards, you know, us all working in partnership and building trust rather than sort of an adversarial kind of climate as we talk about the future use and cleanup of these civic assets. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Stacia. I just want to say you've been really helpful for helping Park Service and the district meet our community engagement roles. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. I'm happy to do it and we'll continue to as long as that's what the community of collaborative partners in APACC says that they want to be done. And I will just let everyone know that as soon as this recording gets processed, I will upload it to our APACC YouTube and I will send a link to that for you guys to share out to folks who weren't able to be a part of this conversation, and definitely want to allow this to inform any last public comments that come in before that deadline that's coming up, so that we make sure that any additional feedback and or questions that we're giving have not already been answered. So thank you for all of that and thank you for everyone for showing up and participating. I appreciate you all and hope you can enjoy the warm weather.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Stacia, just real quick, because that was one thing that wasn't mentioned. So the public comment period ends March 12th, 2021. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yep, and I'll keep sending out reminders for folks about that deadline and continue to sort of cross-promote all of the informational stuff we've been putting out so that everyone has all the information that they can to make their last comments on this cleanup alternative.
Thank you, Stacia. Really appreciate your help.
Thanks, appreciate you as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a good Friday.
Right. Have a great weekend, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Thanks for the view, Trey. Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I'm from Puerto Rico.
Bye. Thanks for co-hosting as usual, Debbie. I appreciate you.
Pleasure. Thanks for